In this tutorial I'm going to speak about how you use Superval. I'm doing this recorded version so that you can look at this during the term, and at each stage as you're going through the actuarial mathematics assignment you will be able to look at this tutorial and just remind yourself of the steps you need to go through. Okay, so the first step is to actually get the data which I've put onto Queen's Online for you, and to actually save it into the right folder. So if you go into your module for actuarial mathematics, look at the resources, and if you go into the continuous assessment project, you'll find a folder called assignment data. Click into that and you'll see some spreadsheets there. You've got 6 spreadsheets, but 3 of them you'll spot say for Superval at the end. Okay, these are the 3 spreadsheets, actives, deferreds and pensioners, that you're going to need in order to do this assignment. So we click on each of these. We'll click on actives first, and what we're going to do initially is just save this into the right place. Now you will need to save this onto your D drive in a folder called Superval/input. On my computer here I'm going to save it onto my C drive, but for yourselves it should be the D drive. So I go into the folder, I find the Superval folder, go into inputs, and I save the folder in there. I do the same for deferreds, and the same for pensioners. Okay, what this does is this makes sure that I've got the data in the right place, so that when I open up Superval it will be able to find the data. It looks into that input folder for the data, so we need to make sure it's in there. Open up Superval. When you open up Superval you'll need to go to Start, then to the Economics and Finance software, and then find Superval at the bottom of that list. I have it open here already. The password is O'Hare, with the O being the number 0 rather than the letter O. You don't need to change that password, just type in the password and then click OK. What you'll see is it will tell you that it's created an input folder. Yours again will be D Superval input. Click on OK and you can see Superval has opened up for you now. What we need to do now then is we need to actually start trying to build up the valuation for this. Now remember, as I talked about in the first lecture, Superval is a piece of software which will take the data from a pension scheme, the active members, the deferreds and the pensioners. It takes their salary information, when they joined, when they left, all that sort of information you would need to work out how much pension they've accrued. It calculates the pension, and then it works out a present value of the pension that's going to be paid out in the future. Okay, so what it needs to do in order to do that is it needs to know, how do we calculate the pension, how do we revalue the pension that somebody has accrued today up until the point at which they retire, how do we discount it back, how many years are we going to pay that pension for. So there's a lot of information that we need to program into this software in order for it to do the calculations. Remember, this is just a piece of software, so it's only going to be as good as the programming that you do, the assumptions that you place in there. So the first thing we do is we go to Data and we start to build. So click on Data, select Build, and you'll see this window opens. And what we're going to do is we're going to add each of the different sections separately. So we'll add the actives initially. You can see that's been selected already. Click on Next, and you'll see now a drop down box, and if you've put the folders in the right place you will see that we've now got our actives final data, deferreds final data, pensioners final data. It's all in that drop down box. If you haven't put them in the right place you will not be able to see them at this stage. So we'll select actives final data, then we click on Next, and you can see that what it's doing now, the data is building up a wizard, and it's just telling us exactly what it can see in that spreadsheet. So we've got the members' names, their gender, what category they are, and remember there's 5 different categories of member, when they were born, when they joined the company, and their salary. And this should be enough information for us to do the calculations for actives. Click on Next, click on Next again, and it tells you how many people you've got, how many categories. Click Finish, and it creates a folder for you. Okay, it tells you it can't find this automake folder. If you click OK it will create it for you anyway. So we've loaded in our actives. Next let's load in our deferreds. So we tick Enhance Deferreds, click Next, then we select our deferred data. Remember, a deferred member is somebody who has accrued some pension in the past, no longer works for the company, so he's not accruing any more pension, but he still has a pension that the company is obliged to pay him. He's not reached retirement yet, but when he does reach retirement he is owed some pension. Again, if we click next, we can see the data that we have for the deferreds. We've got the name, gender, category, date of birth, and then we've got some information here. DOL is the date of leaving, that's when the person left the scheme. NRD, that's the normal retirement date. DP stands for deferred pension, and we have that split into pre-97 deferred pension and post-97 deferred pension. Click next a couple of times and it will tell you how many members you've got in the deferreds categories, and it tells you how many categories you've got. Again, it tells you it can't find that auto-create. Don't worry about that. Click OK and you should be fine. Finally, let's build the pensioners. Let's just load the pensioner members in. So tick on Enhance Pensioners. Next. Select your pension folder. Next again. Again, we've got the same sort of information, but this time for pensioners. Okay, and it tells us a slight problem here. This shouldn't appear when you actually do the work, but I'll just change that now. And if you have a slight problem, you can change it this way. It doesn't like the spouses proportion, so I'm just going to delete that. And you'll see at a later date I can actually say what the spouses proportion is going to be for each member anyway. Click on Save. If I close this now, go back in Superval, move back, and then try Next again. Next, and this time it's fine. And again, it's creating those folders for me. Okay, so that's our data loaded. What we need to do now is we've got the data in there. We now need to tell the software what it's going to do with that data. How is it going to revalue pensions? What assumptions are we going to use? What interest rate? What salary growth, and so on? We do all of that sort of thing through the Basis module. So if we click on Basis module and specify, you'll see you have the various different categories of member, and you have this link at the top called defaults. We click into that first, and this is really allows us to actually put the name of the scheme and the valuation date. You can see I've got the scheme in there as XYZ. You can call the scheme whatever you like, it's up to you. And the valuation date is the 5th of April 2010. You don't need to do anything else at that stage, so if you just close that again, save the session, yes. If you go back in then to defaults, we can now make sure that it picks up those default information for each of the actives, deferreds and pensioners by going to parameters, overwrite, and you can see it starts overwriting the actives, deferreds and pensioners with that same information. So you need to go through that a few times whilst it updates for the actives, for the deferreds and for the pensioners. And what you should find when that's done is when you actually go into your pensioners, actives and deferreds now, that information has been populated for you already. Okay, so we can close that, and then we go back to Basis module, specify, and we select actives. I'm going to set up the actives first. Okay, you can see what it's doing here is it's setting up the whole structure for the active members. So in order to make any changes here, we need to edit the categories, and we have 5 categories. So we go into category 1 first, click OK, and then you can see what it does is it brings up some information. Now I've already populated this, but I'm going to show you the items that you need to populate. You can see that scheme and valuation date should be in there already. The data file will be in there for you because we've loaded that. And you have these folders here, PPF factors. If you double click on this, if you haven't got an entry in there, it allows you to select some PPF factors. We're not actually doing any PPF calculations, so we need to put that in there so that it doesn't break down on us. If it doesn't see anything, it won't actually run, but we're not going to do any kind of PPF calculations. If we go into the Financial tab, this is where we can put in our interest rates. Okay, so you need to enter a pre-retirement interest rate and a post-retirement interest rate. You should have decided in your group what those should be, and they should be based on some sort of long-term assumptions about the returns that you think the investments in your pension scheme can receive. 9% is in there at the moment. That seems ridiculously optimistic to me in terms of long-term returns that you might get on investment, but it's up to you to decide what this entry should be and what this entry should be. Don't worry about switch, you don't need to do anything there. Salary, you need to make some sort of assumption about what you think salary growth is. Now usually salary growth is assumed to be 1 or 2% above inflation, so it will really be determined by however you calculate inflation. Your inflation entry needs to go in here, deferred revaluation rate. Again, you can see the standard entry in there is 5. 5 seems very high. Probably something around about 3 would be realistic these days. Remember all the time when you're working out these assumptions that they are long-term assumptions. The only other things you need to populate in this section are the pension escalation or pension increases, and you need to populate the main and the special. We don't actually have any GMP in our scheme, so we don't need to worry about pre-88 GMP, post-88 GMP. and we only have two different tranches of pension, pre-97 and post-97. So we don't need to populate this penning 3 and penning 4. Okay, we only have two different types of pension anyway, with two different types of increase. We don't need to do anything in financial 1, or in yield curves, or in cash flows. The next tab that you need to actually populate is demographic. And what you do here is you go in and you need to, this is where we're selecting the mortality tables and so on that we should use. So normal early retirement, double click and you'll get a range of retirements there, and maybe in our scheme we'll assume that there's no early retirements. Okay. The main entries that you need to put in here are the proportion married table. Double click and select a proportion married. Totally up to you how you decide this. You should try and justify every assumption that you make, but let's say males 80% are married, females 70% are married. But it's totally up to you. I don't expect you all to use the same assumption. We then need to look at mortality. This is the most important decrement that we put in there. You double click on pre-retirement male table, so we want to pick a male mortality table, and this is relating to the chances of dying before this person has even reached retirement. It's pre-retirement, so he's 20 now and he's contributing to a scheme. What are the chances that he's actually going to die before he gets to 65? Now you can see the default in there is PA 90. The most up-to-date table we have here is PMA 92, and that was used for quite some time. It's in reality, PMA 2000 tables tend to be used these days, and then with some sort of adjustments for them. But we'll use PMA 92. Again, it's up to you how you do this. And I'm going to put an age rating in of -3. All that's doing is it's trying to say, well, actually PMA 92 is slightly out of date. Let's assume that actually somebody now aged 40 has a chance of dying similar to somebody aged 37 in that PMA 92 table. So in other words, saying that life expectancy has improved a little bit. We need to do the same all the way down here, so we need to make sure we're consistent. If we're going to use PMA 92, we should use PFA 92 for the females. And in post-retirement, we tend to use the same mortality table as in pre-retirement. So again, PMA 92 and PFA 92. Now the ill health ones, I'll populate them just for completion, but actually if we're not going to have any ill health benefit, then these ill health mortality tables don't really matter. And again, we'll put in -3 as our age rating in all these cases. Mortality improvements we don't need to do anything with. In the retirement page, the only thing that we'll populate here is the retirement age, so age 65. And you'll notice that in the assignment you're asked to look at the same situation, what happens to the scheme if retirement age becomes 70. This is where you would go to actually make that change then. PPF, we just need to enter these yield dates again, just to make sure that the software doesn't crash on us. But as I said, we're not doing anything with PPF. AOS, death in service, death in deferment, don't worry about, we're not doing anything with those, or with ill health. Salary, just make sure that salary 1 is selected here. It should be the only salary option you have. And make sure that it's picking from salary 0, current salary, because that's what we loaded. We didn't actually load any previous salary in there. Slices is where we actually think about setting up the benefits. So we want to set up the benefits for an active member. We need to calculate those slices. And what we need to calculate is a pre-97 pension and a post-97 pension. And we also need to think about future service. Slice 1 is always reserved for future service. You can just type in a name for it. So we'll call it future service. The start date, double click, is going to be your valuation date. The end date is going to be leaving date. And we'll give it the main pension increase. So we need to remember that future service has a pension increase which comes from main, which if you go all the way back to your original link, financial, you can see that for category 1, main is set to 0, special is set to 0, because that were the pension increases for category 1. Back to slices again, we need to make sure we're picking up a salary. Otherwise what's going to happen here is we have numerator 1, denominator 60, 1/60th of nothing. So it's not going to calculate anything for us. That's slice 1. Slice 1, as I say, is always reserved for future service. Slice 2 and slice 3 are where we're going to calculate pre and post 97 pension. And what we can do here to save us a bit of time, we go into slice 2, basis, copy slice, and we copy slice 1. It just populates it for us. Then we can call this post 97, say. Post 97 service is going to be from the date the person joined the scheme up until the leaving date, but it's post 97, so we don't want to take account of any service before the 5th of April 1997. Post 97 we said is going to be the main pension increase, so that's fine. Salary we've got in there now. We go to category slice 3, basis, copy slice 2, and then we'll just change the name to pre-97 pension. And this time if it's pre-97, it's from when they joined the fund to leaving date, but not after 5/4/97. So we just need to populate that in there. And pre and post 97 pensions got different pension increases. Post 97 is going to get the main. Double click on that main, you can see that you're given the options of the different pension increases there. Special should be our pre 97. So let's remember that the post 97 increase is the main entry, pre 97 is the special. Guarantee slices we don't need to do anything with. Individual slices, you just need to select a start date and the leave date for these. We're not doing anything with individual slices, but again it's just to prevent it from collapsing on us. Member contributions, select salary 1 so that contributions are coming out of salary. Company contributions, again, as a percentage we want them based on salary. And in the underpin you can see we can't leave this unless we enter salary in here, but actually we're not going to do anything with this entry here. New entrants we don't need to worry about. DAB valuation we don't need to worry about. Okay, so we've gone all the way through the actives. We've set up everything we need to. Let's check that it's actually done everything correctly. If you go to basis, there's this option called validate. Now you can look at validate, you can click on that. It will look through and tell you if there are any errors. So you can see in this case no errors are found. But if there's something that you've populated incorrectly, say you've got your start date and you've put in valuation date as when the person joined, for example, it will tell you if you've made an obvious mistake. You should do that before we start to move on to categories 2, 3, 4 and 5. We don't need to print that. Now that we've checked that category 1 looks fine, we want to do categories 2, 3, 4 and 5. And you can see from the assignment, most of the benefits for those categories are the same as for category 1. The only difference is that the pension increases are slightly different. To save us a lot of time, what we can do is we can actually copy the whole setup from category 1 into categories 2, 3, 4 and 5. We do this by going to category, auto, create, and then we just overwrite category 2, category 3, category 4 and so on. So what we'll have now is when we look at category 2 it will look identical to category 1. So let's go to edit now, save what we did for category 1 and let's look at category 2. In category 2 the only thing we need to change are these increases. We know that for category 2 the post 97 increase, which was the main, is going to get our RPI assumption. So we just need to change that to make sure that the pension increase for post 97 for category 2 people is our RPI assumption. We can now edit the next one, save what we did in category 2, go to category 3 and go through the same process. In category 3 both pre and post 97 pension gets RPI. Category, edit, save what we did, go to category 4. In category 4 what we have is post 97 gets 4%, pre 97 gets RPI. Category, edit, save, finally go to category 5, down to financial, and we know in that case both pre and post 97 get 4%. And then we just close that, save. So what we've done now is we've set up the actives completely. The next thing we're going to do is to look at the deferred members. We now go to basis module, specify, enhance deferreds. Again this is setting up the structure for what we need to populate. So it looks a bit similar to the actives, it's not identical but it does look similar. Category edit, category 1, you can see we've got our scheme name and our valuation date sorted out. And it's also got our data in there and the PPF folder. Go to uniform this time. Uniform is where you enter your assumptions. So you can see we've got 9 in here again. Totally unrealistic, I don't expect anybody to use 9. Normal retirement age, 65. Proportion married, we need to select the proportion married tables that we want to use, and usually for deferreds and actives we would use the same mortality, proportion married. So if I've used 80-70 for the actives, I should do the same for the deferreds. Past proportion married, we need to go down to pension escalation, and you can see we have the same options again, main and special. So for category 1 there should be 0 in both cases. There's nothing else on that page that we need to populate. Cash flows we don't need to do anything with. Mortality, we now select our mortality tables. And as with the proportion married, generally for deferreds and actives we use the same assumption for mortality. That's really because the sort of demographic of actives and deferreds is very similar. Deferred people have just moved on to other employment, but they're generally around the same age, the same sort of lifestyle and so on, so you would expect the same kind of mortality experience. Again, because they're deferreds, they've not reached retirement yet, so we have a pre-retirement period and we have a post-retirement period and we have a mortality table in each case. And I'm going to add my minus 3 years rating again to both the pre and post for male and female, pre and post retirement that is. We don't need to do anything with mortality 1. Benefits, all we need to do here is make sure that our revaluation rate is correct. This is our inflation assumption. Yield curves we don't need to do anything with. PPF, we need to just select that PPF date again, just to make sure that the software doesn't crash. Analysis of surplus we don't need to do anything with. PUPs is where we actually need to do most of the work here, and this is similar to the slices section in the actives. PUP stands for paid up pensioner or deferred member. So we have a data item, and if we double click we can see the data items that are pension items for the deferreds. We have the total deferred pension, the pre-97 and the post-97. So we're going to split these two, pre and post-97, because we know they get different increases. And pre-97 we will give the special, post-97 we will give the main. Okay? Similar to the actives again, we can copy slices, we can copy PUPs here. Basis, copy PUP 1, and then just change that to the post-97 data item. We need to make sure the pension increase is changed to main for post, special for pre. And you can see under deferred it's called dynamism. Actually that means pension increase. Okay? You don't need to worry about any of the other entries here. The main thing is to have the right data item and the right pension increase. We don't need to do anything with inputs. With GMP, we just need to select no there. We haven't got any GMP in this calculation, so we don't want it to start looking for a date of leaving and then applying some kind of revaluation rate to GMP that doesn't exist. So just make sure that you've got no selected there. And then finally we don't need to do anything with this NS PUPs. So we'll do the same thing again now. Go to basis and let's validate, just to check if there are any errors. Hopefully you will have the same message, no errors found. We don't need to print that, but now what we can do is we can go to category, auto, create. And we can copy everything again now that we've set up in category 1 for the deferreds to the other 4 categories. We now go through the same process, going into category 2, 3, 4 and 5 and just changing those pension increases. So we go into uniform. Remember our main was post, so for category 2 we need that to be our RPI assumption. Category edit, save, go into category 3. In category 3 we have both pre and post receiving RPI assumption. Category edit into category 4 and into the uniform link. In this case post was getting 4%, special was getting, pre-97 was getting RPI. Category edit and then into category 5, and for category 5 it was 4%. And that's us set up the deferreds. So we'll save that session. Now finally we need to look at the pensioners. Basis module specify, enhance pensioners. And this looks much smaller now. You can see there aren't as many options here because these guys are already in retirement. So we don't have this issue of worrying about pre-retirement and what the mortality might be before they reach retirement and so on, because they're already there. Go to category edit, category 1. You can see the scheme name, the valuation date's all set up for us. Go into the basis module, set your interest rate, and this time you've only got one interest rate because we don't have a discount rate pre-retirement because these guys are in retirement. Pick your proportion married table. Pick your mortality, and then this time we only have mortality in payment. PMA 92, PFA 92, and you may not want to add a rating this time. Remember, our pensioners are going to be much older than our actives and deferreds, so it might be realistic to expect that their mortality is a little bit poorer because they've lived earlier than us. They're not getting the benefits of improvements in healthcare and so on as much as the active and deferred people. So we maybe expect that the mortality for them should be a little bit worse, and generally what you find is that this is taken account of in the age rating side, where you maybe don't apply an age rating for the pensioners, where you applied it for the actives and the deferreds. Click into analysis of surplus. We don't need to do anything there. Definition, this is where we do the same sort of thing as we did for slices in the actives and for pups in the deferreds. You need to pick a data field. We've only got two types of pension, pre-97 and post-97. So we'll select pre-97, give it a description, so we'll just call it pre-97. And then here we actually write in the pension increase rather than selecting main or special. So increases in payment, for category 1, the increases in payment are 0. Increases in deferment doesn't matter because we don't have anybody in deferment. Everybody is already in retirement. Everything else you can leave as it's set up. Go to pension 2, basis, copy pension 1, and just change your data item to post-97. Change your name to post-97, and change the pension increase if you need to. Now for category 1 we don't need to, they're both 0 for pre and post-97. Into the GMP option and just select no again as we did with the deferreds, because we don't have any GMP. We can validate that. Okay, so this time I've forgotten to put in the PPF yield date, so it's actually telling me there's a problem. So I need to go back and just do that. So I don't want to print that, but I need to go back and find the PPF yield date, and here it is down here. Double click and select, and the cap date as well. Okay, as I say, we're not doing anything with PPF, but you can see that it caused a problem there. So now I go to basis, validate again, no errors found, so we're okay this time. Once I've got that, I can go through the same process again, category auto create, overwrite the other 4 categories, and then I will now start going into those categories and changing the pension increases. So we're going to category 2, go into definition, and this time we're just changing a number here. So in category 2, pre-97 0, post-97 RPI. Category edit, save, go into category 3, into definition. Category 3 had RPI increases for pre and post. Category edit, save, into category 4, definition, pre-97 gets RPI, post gets 4. Category edit, save that one, and finally into category 5, definition, 4%, 4%. Then we can close the pensioners. We'll save our session. So that's us completely set up the software now to be able to do the calculations. You can see it's taken some time, it's maybe taken us half an hour or so to do that. And as you go through the assignment, you'll see that I've asked you to look at different types of benefit change. That will require you to go back in after you've run this valuation, make the slight benefit change, and run it again. So it is going to take you some time to carry out this assignment. What we need to do next is we need to actually carry out the run then. We need to run that setup. The way we do that is we go to valuation and we select simple batch. And what this is doing is it's allowing you to select which category of members, what type of members you want to value. So just double click on attained age method, and that's what we're going to use, and then highlight the data sets that we're going to value. So that's the active final data, deferred final data, pensioner final data. You do that just by holding the control button down when you select. Click OK, and what it will do is it will show you all the categories of member that you're going to value. There should be 15 because we had 5 categories for actives, 5 for deferreds, 5 for pensioners. Click into parameters and select no on the attended run. This just prevents the software from updating you every time it's valued a member. You don't really want it to do that when you've got hundreds and hundreds of members. We can close this window, just save what we did there, so make sure it realizes we've selected no for the attended output. Go to valuation and click on run. You'll see this box here where it's got your batch job, that's what we've just set up. Click OK and it should start running for you. Now it takes a little while to run, so I'm just going to pause here while it actually carries out the run, and then we'll come back to the results.